Hey everyone, you're listening to Ordinary Effort, and this week we have something brand new. A while back, we stayed on to talk with the guys from 1988 Tops after recording a grid, and we're sharing that conversation. We talked bobbleheads, baseball cards, players who deserve more credit, and strategies for playing the grid. And speaking of baseball talk, David from Tops is one of the many members of our grid Discord server, where we talk baseball, play grid together every day. We would love to have you join, so check the show description for more details and enjoy the show.
Which player was that?
So this is Kent Tekulve.
I just used Kent Tekulve yesterday for Pirates Reds or Phillies Reds.
Phillies.
Kent Tekulve,
Phillies Reds Pirates.
Kent Tekulve, sidearm pitcher for the 1979 Pirates.
Yeah,
and he also was built like a tapeworm.
Yeah, the submarine, the submarine action made him famous, and I forget. Oh, now who was the guy who Teak ended up teaching the submarine?
He taught to Dan Quisenberry.
Dan Quisenberry.
He passed it along.
So,
but Kent Tekulve was the Pirates closer in the late 70s, and he would come out to the song "Rubber Band Man," the funk song.
Is that the Spinners?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And he had giant science teacher glasses. Like he looked like.
And then
like
the
hat,
so this is, my cousin, got this for me, from the Giant Eagle in Pittsburgh, but the old hats with the stars on them and stuff. And so, yeah, good stuff.
We've had a lot of guests on the show, and something we try to always ask is everyone I feel like has those guys that maybe like a core memory is attached to. So you throw them on the grid because you have like a really early baseball memory, or you just have a guy you just try to get on the grid all the time. If anybody has watched or listened before, for me, that's Eric Kratz. I just remember when the Yankees brought him on, and then when I was early days playing the grid, I was like, oh, people kind of forget backup catchers. That's cool to throw him on. Also, like Ruben Sierra had a bunch of clutch moments when I was a kid watching the Yankees. But yeah, David, Matt, just curious, kind of who are those guys for you who you just top of mind for you when you're playing grid?
I try to fill a grid with 9 guys who we have covered. And so that's 88 Tops guys. And sometimes that doesn't exactly work for the best rarity score if it ends up being an all-star. But like you said, backup catchers are some of my favorites. Ron Hassey. I feel like I use Ron Hassey once a week. He played for the Expos, the White Sox, the Cubs. He was traded from the White Sox to the Yankees multiple times in the same season, back and forth. Ron, I don't know why. He also came up with Cleveland too. So he covers a lot of bases and was a backup catcher. But yeah, Ron Hassey. Also, I'm really bad at remembering the middle relievers that could, that played for every team. So those kind of guys, I don't know. I wish I remembered more of them. But then when in doubt, you use Edwin Jackson or Bartolo Colon or something like that.
Of course, yeah.
That story about the multiple trades from the White Sox to the Yankees for Hassey, that kind of reminds me of Michael Tonkin, because the Mets signed him in the offseason, and then they traded him for cash to the Yankees. It wasn't that he went to the same team, but the Mets signed him, traded him for cash. He got released. The Mets re-signed him, traded him for cash. This was this cycle of Mets just keep on picking up Michael Tonkin and trading him for cash.
Yeah. Between December 12th, 1985 and July 30th, 1986, Hassey was sent from the Yankees to the White Sox, from the White Sox to the Yankees, and then back.
That is probably one of the more wild trade stories I've heard. Yeah,
and was traded for Ron Kittle, a favorite of ours, a guy I like to use, Ron Kittle.
Yeah. Matt, what about you?
Well, it's the same. I mean, in picking players that we've covered because we spend so much time learning about them. I mentioned this before, but one of my favorites is Jack Lazorko, because he had grown up playing hockey, and so he was right. Am I remember? Wait, am I remember? Yeah, I'm remembering this right. This was a long time ago. We covered him.
He played for 4 teams though, but then he played for 11 countries. He played all over the world.
Oh.
It's he was a like hockey goalie coming up in high school. And so we found like video of him as a pitcher, like a comebacker coming up the middle, that he ends up kick saving like a goalie. And so because he's played for, a number of teams, and just that highlight just really endeared him to me. So I always look for him.
That's awesome.
That's like legendary stuff. I've never heard of the guy, no less knew that like there would be a crossover between baseball and hockey like that. I mean, I know you've seen guys play like baseball and football, Deion Sanders, Eric Davis, guys like that, but I don't think I don't think was Tom Glavine a hockey player actually?
He was.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I was just going to say,
yep.
We've had a couple
because he played
Kirk
in
McCaskill as well.
Yeah, I've got right on the deck in the Angels, right next to Lazorko. I've got Kirk McCaskill, the most beautiful man. I mean, he and Mark Chardy are probably the best looking guys in the whole set. McCaskill is like, I think he made he make like people's like 50 or 100 most beautiful people. So,
yep.
Wow.
Kirk McCaskill played hockey. His dad was a professional hockey player. He played and was a finalist for the Hobie Baker Award and was drafted by the Winnipeg Jets, and then played a year professionally, but then ended up signing to play professional baseball instead. Kirk McCaskill ended up playing for the Angels, White Sox, a couple other teams, and Glavine he was drafted ahead of some stars. I feel like Glavine may have been drafted ahead of some guys who ended up having long careers, but decided to play baseball instead.
We've had a couple of those multi-sport stories. Like we had one of our followers on Instagram tell us they love to use Danny Ainge on the grid, who's the Celtics executive and now the Jazz. And I had no idea that he was a baseball player. And I almost had to like double take. I was like, I didn't know he played baseball.
And
Blue
he actually
Jays?
played. Yes. Yeah.
Blue Jays.
He was briefly on the Blue Jays. I know that you guys had some issues with the Silver Sluggers, but there's a guy who I love to use on the Silver Slugger, and it's Damaso Garcia, who played for the Toronto Blue Jays in the 80s. He wasn't that great of an offensive player, but because offense for second baseman was so bad, if you just hit 300 and got some steals, they would give you a Silver Slugger award. So yeah, I don't know why. For some reason, I feel like I've used Damaso Garcia multiple times for.
It's funny you mentioned that. Like that reminds me of not so much Silver Slugger necessarily, but what we had. So a lot of these categories that showed up on the grid early, like Silver Slugger, Rookie of the Year, like we struggle with those. And I remember we had A's Rookie of the Year and learned quickly when people commented on our first mistake, like a bunch of guys, Walt Weiss won Rookie of the Year. So I looked up Walt Weiss's rookie numbers. They were pretty pedestrian to be, and like he turned out to be a solid player, but like I looked at the numbers and it didn't scream Rookie of the Year to me. Like not much power, which he wasn't known for that anyway, but like even the batting average and stuff, I feel like did you get these random guys with stat lines? And one of these, we talk about like our favorite guys. I've thrown Pete Vukovich on the grid multiple times, and because I know he won Cy Young for the Brewers, but I was looking more closely at his stat line. His WHIP was like 1.5 the year he won Cy Young, and I see these stats sometimes. I'm like, what was everybody else in the league doing? Like this was
they weren't measuring WHIP. They just weren't looking at WHIP. They were looking at wins.
That's
and
true.
how many wins your team had, really.
Right.
And for Vukovich, he pitched for the team that won the AL title that year, the Brewers. He went 18-6, but yeah, he had a slightly above average ERA. His ERA plus was 1.14. We talked about Walt Weiss because we had actually, I think maybe Adam Dorowski suggested Jody Reed. And I asked my good friend David, who's a big Red Sox fan, I said, what are your thoughts about Jody Reed? And he swore up and down, Jody Reed should have won the 1988 American League Rookie of the Year. I will die on that hill. And then we looked at Jody Reed's stats, and he was much better than Walt Weiss. But Walt Weiss played for the A's, who won the American League
Yeah.
title.
Look
And
at that
Walt Weiss
picture.
was fine. And
Look at
yeah,
how
look at Jody
sad
Reed.
Jody Reed looks. It's like in parts unknown. You know, the sea was angry that day.
Yeah.
Well, he knows he was robbed. That's why. That's
Yeah, Jody Reed.
Yeah.
He hit
Well, that's like
293 for the Red Sox that year. Got nothing.
that reminds me of Ellis Burks. I know we threw him on the grid we did together. Well, no, we didn't throw him, but we mentioned him in one of the
Yeah.
boxes. And my thing with him is just his 1990s. I got to do something more about this because like I could go on about it. But his Ellis Burks's 1996 season. I know like Colorado or whatever, the people don't like to give players credit for being good because Colorado, the Coors effect or whatever. But Ellis Burks's 96 season was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I did, yeah. At some point, I'm gonna elaborate more on that, but
And
yeah,
unfortunately, that was the year Ken Caminetti played for. Did the Padres win?
Padres.
The
He won unanimously. Well, oh, that might have been no, that
They
wasn't
won
the
the
World
NL West
Series
that
year.
year.
Okay, because the World Series team was not till '98, I think, right? So it wasn't that they okay. Yeah, he
Yeah.
was a unanimous, and he had great stats, but I think I was like lining up Burks to Caminiti and just like sorting the guys who got votes for that year's MVP, and like Burks was ahead of Caminetti in everything but maybe one category, and I think they tied another category. I think they both had 40 home runs or something. I'm going to go off more on this at some point because I need to put this out into the world. Ellis Burks was robbed, but
in the same outfield in the 80s. So in 1987, both he and Mike Greenwell were rookies. And then in 88, Mike Greenwell was similarly robbed. So Caminetti, later steroids allegations. Greenwell finished second in MVP voting to Jose Canseco in 1988. And later, Greenwell said, maybe you guys should reconsider that, knowing what we know about Jose Canseco.
Right.
yeah,
But Ellis Burks hit 344 in 1996 with 40 home runs.
Yeah.
It was the numbers were ridiculous. Like WRC plus, I think he was ahead of most everybody else too. Like almost every metric he had was his stolen bases were higher than I think he had the most stolen bases of anybody who got votes that year too.
It's funny to
30-30
hear.
season.
Yeah, it's funny to hear you guys say that, like how much the your team winning the title mattered, and how quickly that changed. Like I remember in the 2000s when A-Rod won the MVP with the Rangers, and I remember just thinking like I think they were a 50-win team, or it was a pretty miserable year for the Rangers, and he just put out such an offensive year. But it's funny to hear how that like public sentiment amongst the voter can change so quickly. So
I
yeah,
feel like you have something kind of sort of similar dynamic with the whole Otani Lindor thing now. It's like people are the case for Otani is that his numbers are ridiculous, but like how valuable is he? Dodgers. Where would the Dodgers be without him versus where the Mets would be without Lindor? And the other thing, there was another thought I had about that too. Jacob deGrom, right? Like there was the whole thing about outside of wins, um, his numbers were by far Cy Young worthy, but people would knock him because the Mets just couldn't score runs for him, so he didn't have the win totals. And like I guess, like you said about Vukovic, he had the high win totals, and I know that was tended to have been a factor in how these guys were voted for in these awards categories. It's interesting.
I do like the awards categories on Immaculate Grid, and partially that's because with the 80s ones, I do remember some of them because of going through these cards and looking and going like, how did Andre Dawson not win an MVP when he played for Montreal? And then looking at who won it instead. And then saying, okay, he didn't win it until 1987. And now if you look back with modern metrics, he did not really deserve to win the 87 MVP. He just hit 49 home runs, and everyone was wowed by that number. But that's because it was the rabbit ball year. So part of the reason why we like to talk about 1987, it was this weird year where you hadn't had a lot of guys hit 40. You hadn't had a guy hit 50 home runs since the 70s. And then you have McGuire hitting 49 and Dawson hitting 49, driving in 137 runs. But if you look at the modern metrics, Tony Gwynn was better than him in terms of wins above replacement. Eric Davis, who is the first episode that we did because he was my favorite card. We had a fan made this special card for us and did some card art. And on the back of it is another favorite who we don't get to use a lot, but the great
Jay
Jay
Baller.
Baller. Look at this.
This is the best card ever.
That is like, how did
The
he get a
chest
special?
hair.
I was gonna say, like, got a special cut he requested to
Gold
show off the
chains.
hair. Or,
Played a lot of winter ball in Venezuela.
man. Wow. And like,
I don't get
Baller,
to use Jay Baller
yeah.
enough. He only played for the Cubs, Phillies, and Royals, so I don't get to use him enough in the grid.
Hmm. That's
I don't know
awesome.
that name either. I've never heard of him before either. Wait, so you
For
said
good reason.
a fan made that card, the double-sided card?
Yeah, I think it's 2 cards, but he put it in one. A fan and his son teamed up. Oh, the back of this one is just a Jay Baller. I didn't realize that.
There you
Look at
go.
that.
That's
awesome.
amazing.
Fan-made cards.